The scream of sirens tore through the pre-dawn silence, a jagged knife slicing Caleb's dreams apart. He bolted upright in his attic bedroom, heart hammering, the salty tang of Maine's coast seeping through the cracked window. Below, the town of Haven's Edge stirred, unaware of the secret that would unravel by sunrise. Caleb, 19, had always been the quiet one, the boy with storm-gray eyes who sketched the ocean's moods in charcoal and hid his heart behind a shy smile. But tonight, his hands trembled not from cold, but from the weight of a promise made years ago. He pulled on his worn jacket, the one Eli had teased him about for its frayed cuffs, and checked the clock for 37 a.m. Time was slipping away. Downstairs, the house creaked under the weight of his father's expectations. Pastor Jonah Wright, Haven's Edge's moral compass, preached love but wielded judgment like a gavel. Caleb had learned early to bury his truth, to let his love for Eli, his best friend, his first everything, live only in stolen glances and whispered confessions behind the old lighthouse. But Eli was in danger now, and Caleb's silence was no longer enough. Eli's family, the Morgans, were stricter still, their wealth built on a fishing empire and a rigid code of tradition. When Eli's father caught him with a boy from the next town over, the punishment was swift, a one-way ticket to a conversion camp upstate, a place whispered about in hushed tones, where kids went in whole and came out broken. Eli had called Caleb last night, voice cracking over the payphone, begging for help. "They're coming for me at dawn," he'd said. "Caleb, I can't survive that place." Now, Caleb slipped out the back door, the cold biting his skin as he ran toward the cliffs where they'd carved their initials into a cedar tree at 15. The plan was reckless. Get Eli to the bus station before the Morgan's men found him. Use Caleb's savings for a ticket to Boston, where Eli could disappear into the city sprawl. But what did freedom mean if it cost Caleb the only person who'd ever seen him fully? The town was a maze of narrow streets and judgmental eyes, even at this hour. Caleb's sneakers slapped against the cobblestones as he reached the Morgan estate, its iron gates looming like a prison. Eli was waiting in the shadows, his dark curls matted with sweat, his green eyes wide with fear. "You came," he whispered, clutching Caleb's hand. The warmth of his touch was a lifeline, but the distant hum of a car engine snapped them back to reality. They ran, hearts pounding in sync, toward the bus station at the edge of town. The horizon glowed faintly, a promise of freedom or a warning of time running out. Eli's breath hitched as he spoke, words tumbling out between gasps. "If they catch me, Caleb, they'll break me. I won't be me anymore." Caleb squeezed his hand tighter, refusing to let the fear win. But as they neared the station, headlights cut through the fog, and Caleb's stomach dropped. The Morgan's men were closing in. What would you do if the person you loved most was about to be taken away forever? How far would you go to protect them, knowing the cost might be your own future? Caleb faced that choice now, the weight of it crushing his chest as he pulled Eli behind a dumpster, their breaths mingling in the cold air. The dumpster's metal was cold against Caleb's back, but Eli's warmth beside him was a fleeting comfort. The headlights swept closer, tires crunching gravel, and Caleb's mind raced for a way out. He'd promised Eli freedom, but the Morgan's men were relentless, their loyalty bought by fear and money. Caleb peeked around the edge, spotting two figures climbing out of the black SUV, big men, the kind who didn't ask questions. "Stay low," he whispered to Eli, whose trembling hand gripped his. The bus station was just across the street, its neon sign flickering like a dying star. The 5:15 bus to Boston was their only shot, but it might as well have been 1,000 miles away. "We can't outrun them," Eli murmured, his voice barely audible. "They'll drag me back. Caleb, you should go." His eyes, usually so bright, were clouded with resignation. Caleb's heart twisted. Leave Eli. The boy who'd taught him to laugh, to dream, to feel alive in a town that suffocated them both. Impossible. What does loyalty look like when the stakes are life-altering? Can you protect someone without losing yourself? Caleb pushed those questions aside, his mind sharpening with a desperate plan. The alley, he said, pointing to a narrow path between the hardware store and a shuttered diner. It loops back to the station. We move fast. They darted out, keeping low, the fog their only ally. The alley smelled of damp wood and stale grease. But it was cover. Caleb's pulse thundered as they reached the station's back entrance, the ticket booth just visible through the mist. He fumbled in his pocket, pulling out the crumpled bills he'd saved from summer job's $87. Barely enough for Eli's ticket. Take it, he said, pressing the money into Eli's hand. Get on that bus. Eli shook his head, tears welling. What about you? If they see you help me, Caleb cut him off, his voice fierce. I'll be fine. You're the one they want. But the lie tasted bitter. Caleb knew the Morgans wouldn't let this go, and his father's wrath would be worse. Pastor Jonah had already warned him about sinful influences, his gaze lingering too long on Caleb's sketches of Eli. The bus's engine rumbled, a low growl signaling departure. Eli hesitated, then pulled Caleb into a fierce hug, their foreheads touching. I love you, he whispered, the words a fragile gift. Before Caleb could respond, footsteps echoed in the alley. They were out of time. Caleb shoved Eli toward the bus. Go, he hissed, turning to face the approaching shadows. Eli stumbled but ran, disappearing into the station's glow. Caleb's chest ached as he stepped into the open, drawing the men's attention. Hey, he shouted, voice cracking but defiant. The men turned, their faces hard, and Caleb ran the opposite way, leading them away from Eli. What would you sacrifice to give someone you love a chance at freedom? How does it feel to know your choice might cost you everything? Caleb's legs burned as he sprinted toward the cliffs, the ocean's roar growing louder, his heart screaming with every step. The cliffs loomed ahead, jagged and unforgiving, as Caleb's sneakers skidded on loose gravel. The Morgans' men were close, their shouts cutting through the fog like blades. He could hear the bus pulling away in the distance, carrying Eli to safety, or so he hoped. Caleb's plan had been simple: distract them long enough for Eli to board. But now, with the ocean roaring below and nowhere left to run, doubt gnawed at him. Had Eli made it? Or had Caleb's gamble been for nothing? His lungs burned, but he pushed forward, weaving through the cedar trees where he and Eli had once dreamed of a life beyond Haven's Edge. The men were gaining, their boots heavy on the path. Caleb's mind flashed to the summer he'd fallen for Eli, the way their laughter had echoed under the lighthouse, the way Eli's hand had felt in his as they watched the stars. That memory fueled him now, a spark against the fear. But as he reached the cliff's edge, a hand grabbed his shoulder, spinning him around. It was Amos, the Morgans' head enforcer, his face a mask of cold fury. Where's the boy? He growled, his grip bruising. Caleb's knees buckled, but he held Amos's gaze, defiant. Gone, he spat, praying it was true. Amos's partner, a wiry man named Tuck, scanned the horizon, cursing under his breath. The bus was out of sight. What does it mean to stand your ground when the odds are against you? How do you find courage when fear is all you feel? Caleb's heart pounded as Amos shoved him toward the cliff's edge, the drop to the rocks below dizzying. You helped him, Amos said. Not a question, but a verdict. Caleb didn't deny it. There was no point. You know what happens to kids like you in this town, Amos continued, his voice low and venomous. The camp's got room for one more. Caleb's stomach lurched, He'd heard the stories kids sent to the camp never came back the same. Their spirits crushed under the guise of fixing them. The thought of Eli there had been unbearable. But now Caleb faced that fate himself. Tuck stepped forward, his eyes flickering with something like pity. "Tell us where he went, kid, and maybe we let you walk." Caleb's mind raced. Betray Eli? Never. But the cliff's edge was too close. The men too strong. He thought of his father, of the sermons that branded love like his a sin. He thought of Eli. Free. Maybe. In Boston. Starting over. That was enough. "I don't know." Caleb lied, his voice steady despite the fear. Amos sneered, raising a fist, but Tuck grabbed his arm. "Not here," he muttered. "The boss wants him alive." They dragged Caleb back toward the SUV, his wrists bound with a zip tie. As the sky lightened, painting the cliffs in gold, Caleb clung to the hope that Eli was safe. What would you hold on to when everything else is slipping away? How does hope survive in the face of despair? Caleb's fate was uncertain, but his love for Eli burned brighter than the sunrise. The SUV's engine rumbled as it sped through Haven's Edge. Caleb trapped in the back seat, wrists aching from the zip ties. Amos drove, his knuckles white on the wheel, while Tuck muttered into a phone, reporting to the Morgans. The town blurred past salt-weathered houses, the church where Caleb's father preached, the life he'd never fit into. Caleb's mind was a storm of questions. Had Eli boarded the bus? Was he safe in Boston? Or had someone caught him at the last second? The uncertainty was a knife in his chest, sharper than the fear of what awaited him. Amos's words echoed. The camp's got room for one more. Caleb had heard the rumor's harsh discipline, endless prayers, kids stripped of their identities. He wasn't sure he could survive it. What does it mean to lose yourself for someone else's sake? Can love endure when you're forced to become someone you're not? Caleb stared out the window, the ocean's horizon fading as they turned inland. He thought of Eli's laugh, the way it lit up even the darkest nights. If Eli was free, Caleb's sacrifice was worth it. But the cost was sinking in. The SUV stopped at the Morgan estate, its gates swinging open with a groan. Caleb was dragged inside, the mansion's opulence a stark contrast to his frayed jacket and trembling hands. "Mr." Morgan waited in the study, his face carved from stone. "You helped my son run," he said, voice low but lethal. "You think you're a hero, boy." Caleb swallowed, his throat dry. "I did what was right." The words felt fragile, but they were his truth. "Mr." Morgan's eyes narrowed, and he leaned forward, his wealth and power radiating like a threat. "Right. You've ruined him. And now you'll pay for it." The deal was brutal. Caleb would take Eli's place at the camp. The Morgans would tell the town Eli had been sent away, preserving their reputation, while Caleb bore the punishment. If he refused, they'd hunt Eli down, no matter where he hid. Caleb's heart sank. This wasn't just about him, Anna Maria, it was about protecting Eli's chance at a new life. What would you do if your choice was between your own freedom and someone else's safety? How do you carry the weight of a sacrifice no one else sees? Caleb nodded, the motion heavy with finality. "I'll go," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Mr." Morgan smirked, satisfied, and Amos hauled Caleb back to the SUV. The camp was a 6-hour drive, a place called Redemption Hill, its name a cruel irony. As the vehicle pulled away, Caleb caught a glimpse of the lighthouse, its beam cutting through the dawn. He and Eli had dreamed there, planned a future that seemed impossible now. But even as fear clawed at him, Caleb held on to the image of Eli. Free, somewhere far from here. Redemption Hill loomed at the end of a dirt road, a cluster of gray buildings surrounded by barbed wire and pine trees. Caleb's stomach churned as the SUV rolled through the gates. The sign above reading, "Through faith, we heal." The irony burned. This wasn't healing, it was erasure. Amos shoved him toward the intake office, where a stern woman with a clipboard took his name and belongings. His sketchbook, filled with drawings of Eli and the ocean, was tossed into a bin like trash. "You won't need that here," she said, her voice flat. Caleb's chest tightened. That sketchbook was his heart, his memories. Losing it felt like losing a piece of himself. What do you hold on to when everything that defines you is stripped away? How do you keep loving someone when you're told it's wrong? Caleb was led to a dorm, a cold room with bunk beds and barred windows. The other boys, some younger, some older, avoided his gaze, their eyes hollow. The camp's rules were clear: no talking about deviant desires, no defiance, no hope. Days blurred into weeks. Mornings began with prayers, led by counselors who spoke of sin with a fervor that chilled Caleb. Afternoons were therapy sessions, where he was forced to recount his feelings for Eli, only to be told they were unnatural, a phase to be fixed. At night, he lay awake, replaying Eli's smile, his voice, the way he'd said, "I love you." It was all Caleb had left. But there were cracks in the camp's armor. A boy named Sam, 17, with a scar above his eyebrow, whispered to Caleb one night. "They can't take what's in your head," he said, his voice fierce. Sam had been there 6 months, sent for kissing a teammate. He taught Caleb to hide his thoughts, to fake compliance while guarding his truth. "You're here for someone, aren't you?" Sam asked. Caleb nodded, unable to speak Eli's name. What does it mean to resist when resistance could break you? How do you protect your heart in a place designed to crush it? Caleb started small acts of defiance, sketching Eli's face in the margins of a Bible, whispering their story to himself like a prayer. He didn't know if Eli was safe, but imagining him free in Boston kept Caleb going. One day, a letter slipped under his pillow, smuggled by Sam. It was unsigned, but the handwriting was Eli's, shaky but unmistakable. "I'm safe. I owe you everything. I'll find you." Caleb's breath caught, tears blurring the words. Eli was alive, free. But the letter ended with a warning: "They're watching you. Be careful." Caleb hid the letter in his sock, his heart racing. Hope was dangerous here, but it was also power. He had to survive. For Eli. For himself. But how long could he hold on in a place like this? The letter changed everything. Caleb clutched it in his dreams. Eli's words a lifeline in the suffocating routine of redemption hell. But hope was a double-edged sword. It fueled him, but it also made him reckless. He caught himself staring at the horizon too long, whispering Eli's name in the dark, drawing his face in the dust under his bunk. Sam noticed the change. "You're slipping," he warned one night, his voice low as they scrubbed dishes in the camp's kitchen. "They're watching you closer now." Caleb nodded, but his mind was elsewhere, imagining Eli in Boston, maybe sketching in a park, free to be himself. The thought was worth every risk. What does it mean to hold on to hope when it could destroy you? How do you balance love with survival? Caleb tried to be careful, but the counselors were relentless. 1. Mr. Hargrove, a man with a preacher's smile and a predator's eyes, singled Caleb out in sessions. "You're still clinging to that boy, aren't you?" he'd say, leaning too close. Caleb's silence was his only shield, but it wasn't enough. One morning, Hargrove caught Caleb sketching Eli's initials in a notebook. The punishment was swift: 3 days in isolation, a windowless room with nothing but a Bible and his thoughts. In the dark, Caleb's mind unraveled. He saw Eli's face, heard his laugh, but also his father's voice, preaching fire and brimstone. Doubt crept in. Had he done the right thing? Was Eli really safe? Or had Caleb sacrificed himself for nothing? When they let him out, Sam was waiting, his scar stark under the fluorescent lights. "You're stronger than this," he said, slipping Caleb a folded note. It was another message from Eli, smuggled through a network of sympathetic staff. "I'm working on a plan," it read. "Hold on." Caleb's heart soared, but fear followed. A plan meant danger. For both of them. What would you risk to keep a promise? How do you trust when betrayal is everywhere? Caleb began to notice the camp's routines, the gaps in security. A delivery truck left the gate unlocked every Tuesday. A guard napped during the 3 a.m. shift. Sam had been mapping it out, whispering plans of escape. "We could go together," he said. But Caleb hesitated. Leaving meant risking Eli's safety if the Morgans found out. They'd hunt him down. Days later, Hargrove called Caleb to his office. "We know about the letters," he said, holding up Eli's note. Caleb's blood ran cold. "You've got a choice, boy. Tell us where he is, or we make things worse." Caleb's mind raced. Betray Eli, or endure whatever worse meant. He thought of the cliff, the sunrise, the moment he'd chosen Eli's freedom over his own. "I don't know where he is," Caleb lied, his voice steady. Hargrove's smile vanished. "Then you'll stay here until you do," he said. "Forever, if that's what it takes." Forever echoed in Caleb's mind as he scrubbed floors. The camp's punishment for his silence. Redemption Hill was a machine, grinding down hope. But Caleb clung to Eli's letters, hidden now in a loose floorboard. Each word was a rebellion, a reminder that love could survive even here. Sam's escape plan grew clearer. The delivery truck, the sleeping guard details Caleb memorized like a map to freedom. But the risks were crushing. If they failed, the Morgans would know Eli was alive, and their reach was long. Caleb wrestled with the choice, stay and endure, or run and gamble everything. What does freedom mean when it's tied to someone else's safety? How do you choose between your own life and the one you love? Caleb lay awake, tracing Eli's initials in his mind. Sam's voice broke the silence one night. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "The truck leaves at dawn. You in?" Caleb's heart raced. He nodded, but fear gnawed at him. What if Eli's plan needed him to stay? The next morning, chaos erupted. A fire alarm Sam's doing sent the camp into disarray. Boys spilled into the courtyard, counselors shouting. Caleb and Sam slipped through the confusion, reaching the delivery truck as it idled by the gate. Sam climbed in, gesturing for Caleb to follow. But Caleb froze. Eli's warning they re-watching rang in his ears. If he ran, would they find Eli? "Go," Caleb said, shoving Sam toward the truck. "I'll cover you." Sam's eyes widened, but he nodded, slipping into the cargo hold as the driver returned. Caleb turned back, heart pounding, and faced Hargrove, who'd spotted him. "Going somewhere." The counselor sneered, grabbing Caleb's arm. The truck pulled away, Sam hidden inside, and Caleb exhaled. One of them was free. What does it mean to let go of your own escape for another's? How do you carry on when hope feels like betrayal? Hargrove dragged Caleb to the isolation room again. But this time, Caleb felt a spark of defiance. Sam's escape was proof the camp wasn't invincible. And Eli was out there, planning something. Caleb just had to hold on. Days later, a new letter arrived, slipped into his bunk by an unknown ally. Eli's words were urgent. "I've got help. We're coming for you. Stay strong." Caleb's chest tightened. Help. Who could Eli trust in a world that had turned on them both? The camp felt smaller now, the walls closing in. But Caleb's resolve grew. He'd survive. For Eli. For the life they'd promised each other. As dawn broke, Caleb stared out the barred window. The sunrise a mirror of that morning on the cliffs. He didn't know what Eli's plan was, but he knew one thing. Their love was worth every sacrifice. The sunrise painted Redemption Hill in hues of gold, but Caleb saw only bars and shadows. Eli's latest letter burned in his mind. We're coming for you. Who was we? How could Eli, a fugitive in Boston, orchestrate a rescue? Doubt and hope waged war in Caleb's chest, but he clung to the memory of their cliffside promise, their initials carved in cedar. Weeks passed, each day a test of endurance. Hargrove's scrutiny intensified, his sessions probing for cracks in Caleb's silence. You think your boyfriend's coming back? He taunted. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. His defiance was his armor, forged by love and loss. He thought of Sam, free now, and prayed Eli was still safe. What does it mean to wait for a promise that might never come? How do you hold on to love when the world demands you let go? Caleb found strength in small rebellions, whispering Eli's name like a mantra, sketching their lighthouse in the dust. But the camp was breaking him, piece by piece. His hands, once steady with charcoal, shook. His dreams, once vivid with Eli's smile, grew faint. Then, one night, everything changed. A storm rolled in, thunder shaking the dorm's walls. In the chaos, a figure slipped into Caleb's room, a woman, her face hidden by a hood. Eli sent me, she whispered, pressing a key into his hand. Gates open. Run. Caleb's heart stopped. Was this a trap? But her eyes held a fierce kindness, and he recognized her, Lila, a waitress from Haven's Edge who'd always smiled at him and Eli. What would you do if salvation came in a stranger's face? How do you trust when trust has burned you before? Caleb followed Lila through the ring, dodging guards, his pulse a drumbeat. They reached the gate, where a car waited, engine running. Eli was in the driver's seat, his face older, harder, but unmistakably him. Caleb stumbled forward, tears mixing with rain, and fell into Eli's arms. You're here, he choked out. They drove, the storm masking their escape. Eli explained, Lila was part of a network helping kids like them, funded by a Boston activist group. They'd been planning for months, tracking Caleb, waiting for the right moment. But the Morgans were still searching, and Haven's Edge wasn't safe. We'll keep moving, Eli said, his hand finding Caleb's. Together. The road stretched ahead, uncertain but free. Caleb looked at Eli, the boy he'd sacrificed everything for, and felt the weight of their lovey, a love that had defied a town, a camp, a world that tried to break them. The sunrise broke through the storm, and Caleb smiled. They'd escaped, but the scars remained. Their future was theirs to build, one sunrise at a time.